Please rise for the presentation of the colors by the ROTC Tri-Service Color Guard and our national anthem sung by Iowa State Assistant Teaching Professor Chad Sonka.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated. Thank you. Thank you, and welcome to Iowa State University's Gold Star Hall ceremony. In 1928, the doors of the Memorial Union opened to a living memorial for those who selflessly protect the freedoms of our country. The Gold Star Hall ceremony is our opportunity to celebrate the lives of the men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. Today, we come together to hear the stories of 5 Iowa State students who answered the call to serve our country and remember the impact of these incredible members of the Iowa State family. A tradition within the military that builds a sense of belonging is to present a coin, which signifies a person's connection to an organization. Iowa State University has designed a coin to honor this tradition and to help foster new connections. On one side of our coin is the gold star and the words which are engraved in the Gold Star Hall, "For thee they died," reminding us of the sacrifice of those who have gone before us. The other side reads, Iowa State University, and the motto, "Learning to return services to those who served us." We'll have a coin available for viewing in the Oak Room following the ceremony. After the narratives about each of our honorees, the director of the Military Affiliated Student Center, Rita Case, will give each family a coin to keep. It is meant to demonstrate our commitment and to serve as a reminder that these honorees are part of all of us. And we will continue to remember and respect each person whose name is inscribed on the walls of the Gold Star Hall. At this time, we will now hear videotaped remarks from Iowa State President Wendy Winterstein.
Good afternoon. I'm Wendy Winterstein, President of Iowa State University. On behalf of the Iowa State community, I'm honored to welcome you to the annual Gold Star Hall ceremony. This ceremony is a time of reflection and reverence for the service and sacrifice made by our fellow Iowa Staters. It is our opportunity to share our deep gratitude to our veterans and current members of the armed forces and to recognize the family and friends who provide love and support. Gold Star Hall stands as a living memorial to nearly 600 Iowa Staters who died serving in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Somalia, and in the global war on terrorism. We are deeply indebted to all those who have answered the call to serve. Today, we honor 5 Cyclones for their military service and for making the ultimate sacrifice to defend our freedom. James Davis attended Iowa State and then joined the Army Air Force in 1941. Raymond Davis studied forestry before joining the Air Force in 1942. Howard Medine graduated with a degree in agriculture before enlisting in the Army Air Force in 1942. Ronald Reedy majored in aerospace engineering and joined the Marines after graduating in 1966. Donald Wilkins was a member of ROTC and earned a degree in pre-med before going on to medical school and beginning his military service in 1950. You will soon hear the stories of these men, of their time here on campus, and of their military service. Not unlike the students of today, these men worked hard in the classroom. They were also athletes and fraternity brothers. They held jobs on campus and led student organizations. They were active in the community and believed in the importance of public service. These young men, and all of the individuals whose names are etched in Gold Star Hall, deserve our respect and appreciation. We offer our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of these service members, and we take heart in knowing their Cyclone spirit lives on in the walls of the Memorial Union. As you pass through Gold Star Hall, I encourage you to look up to the 12 stained glass windows. Each window depicts a virtue that represents what it means to be an Iowa Stater. They include learning, courage, faith, determination, love, loyalty, and integrity. I asked all members of the Iowa State community to join me in paying tribute to the men and women who have made the ultimate sacrifice by living these virtues every day. Thank you for helping us honor our service members and for being part of this special ceremony.
Next, we'll hear from Captain Joel Franson of the United States Navy and Iowa State's ROTC program. Captain Joey Franson, excuse me.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family. My name is Captain Joey Franson. I'm the Professor of Naval Science here at the Naval ROTC program at Iowa State. It's an honor to be here today to say a few words. On November 11th, 1918, the armistice was signed ending the hostilities of World War I, at which time more than 116,000 Americans had sacrificed their lives in the Great War. From the historic events of that day, Veterans Day, or what was originally known as Armistice Day, was created. In that same vein, the Memorial Union was opened in 1928 and dedicated to the memory of those Iowa Staters that lost their lives in World War I. Their names are engraved on the wall in the foyer of the Gold Star Hall. 94 years later, Memorial Union still stands, and its purpose still rings true. A memorial to the 6,000 Iowa State College men and women who offered their lives during the World War in the cause of human liberty and free government. Since World War I, every generation of Iowa Staters has been called to serve. Many have died to protect those freedoms. It is the ultimate gift and the eternal sacrifice. Today we honor that sacrifice. We remember that liberty and freedom that we enjoy is laid upon the lives of great men and women who died protecting and ensuring our way of life continues for all future generations. Today we honor 5 heroes whose sacrifices in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam are eternally etched in stone. Inscription above the north door is a solemn reminder of what those 5 names represent. It reads, "For thee they died, Master and Maker, God of right, the soldier dead are at thy gate, who kept the spears of honor bright, and freedom's house inviolate." No amount of time should ever allow us to forget their sacrifice was for each of us. It was for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and future generations. It is our duty as citizens of this great nation to honor them, not just today, but every day of our lives. For not their sacrifice, the light of freedom would not burn so bright. So to the men and women etched upon the stone, thank you. Thank you for serving, and thank you for your sacrifice. I would like to close with reading an inscription written on a nondescript memorial from World War I that commemorates 2 young men from neighboring parishes killed on the same day, approximately a year apart. The inscription eloquently reads, "All that we have gave, all that was ours to give, freely surrendered all, that you in peace might live. In trench and field and seas we lie, we who in dying shall not ever die. If only you in honor of the slain shall surely see we did not die in vain." Thank you, and God bless you.
Next, I'd like to invite Major Bryce Martins up to speak. Major Martins is a veteran and an Iowa State graduate student.
Thank you for the honor to get to speak and represent student veterans at Iowa State. I grew up in Ames, Iowa, only a few miles from here, as a son of 2 Iowa State grads. I spent time on campus with Boy Scouts, learning wilderness survival from the ISU ROTC. I took trombone lessons in music hall. I was horrible. And I even took classes at ISU during my senior year of high school. However, it has taken me 15 years to finally get to graduate at Iowa State. After high school, I decided to forego the college experience and instead attended West Point. I commissioned in 2011 and went into the Army Signal Corps. Then, in 2020, I was offered the opportunity to attend graduate school while on active duty, and I jumped at the opportunity to come back to Iowa State and get the real college experience. I highlight this gap because that was the time when I gained a true appreciation for the military community, for the family, and for the sacrifice that service members and their families make. I highlight family because I would not have had any chance of being successful in the military without family. Attending West Point would not have been possible if it were not for my parents' support in my time during Boy Scouts, running track, and then driving me to information sessions at West Point, and then quizzing me before congressional and nomination interviews and taking me out to see West Point once I was accepted. Their continued support upon graduation and commission into the Army, and my wife's Tessa's family support throughout my career has been unwavering and a testament to the many extended military families who catch the flight, drive the distance, and take the time to support their military kids no matter where they are. My wife Tess has voluntarily spent her honeymoon in a moving truck driving from Iowa to Savannah, Georgia. She spent 6 months just trying to convince a nursing board in Georgia that she was formerly Teresa Cook, but now Teresa Martins, in order to get her nursing license in Georgia. all while supporting me in my first years of being a young signal lieutenant who was figuring out how to lead soldiers, communicate effectively, and not look like a lost new college graduate. I deployed less than a year after getting to the 3rd Infantry Division in Savannah, and Tess built support with other wives, as well as continued her nursing career. She would go on to do that again and again as we built a family, moved multiple times, deployed again, and had countless trips with me gone and unreachable, and her at home working while raising 3 boys. The success of service members is dependent on that family and support. The Gold Star program was born out of that very need to acknowledge that a family member was deployed by displaying a blue star, and in the event that service member was killed, to acknowledge the loss of that family with a gold star. I believe in today's time, as well as back then, the blue star was just as important to a service member because they wanted others to know that their family was stepping up and supporting them while they were gone. I highlight community because community that exists within the military is something I encountered early. I was headed to new cadet basic training in the summer of 2007, but had the opportunity to work out with the ISU ROTC juniors before they headed off to cadet summer training. I learned how to climb a rope, keep in step on a group run, and sing a few cadences. Those few weeks were critical to help me get a taste of what was to come and enjoy that camaraderie. Returning to ISU 14 years later, I was taught humility as I took the Army combat fitness test with the ISU ROTC cadets and was in the middle of the pack on the 2-mile run. Tess and I have found that same community and support in every military assignment. Our neighbor came to get Tess while I was deployed in Afghanistan, and her car had broken down. Tess herself drove a friend and her baby to the ER, while I tried to convince the other 6 children to go to bed and not watch Moana a 3rd time. Multiple friends helped me load a semi-truck with our belongings last summer because we had to move ourselves during the largest move of military personnel since World War II. The demands and constant moves of the military foster a reliance on others who you may have just met and their reliance on you. This forges a strong community that understands and supports one another as they support their military service members. Coming back to Ames and embracing the community Tess and I left 10 years ago had a different feeling, but it was the same level of support. Having friends offer to rent us a duplex close to campus 5 months before our move was unheard of to Tess and I. Having aunts, uncles, grandparents, and cousins at their house every week was something my kids had never experienced in their life. Even with this familiar community, we still maintain links to the military through close friends, military friends who now retired our names, and fellow veterans who I met in classes and at the Veterans Center. I personally listened to 2 ISU veterans discuss the finer points of the older ASIP radio versus the Combat Net radio. And while I found that exchange entertaining, I also realized the importance of the ISU Veterans Center and its military community it provides to connect within the ISU community, especially as many of these ISU students have recently transitioned out of the service and missed that community. Lastly, I highlight sacrifice, because the community and the family that I've experienced while in the military has only come about because of sacrifice. The sacrifice of my family, specifically my wife and kids, to move schools, jobs, and houses every time we receive orders. The sacrifice of our extended family to travel, to call, to take vacation days and support us. The sacrifice of military families to support other military families when they move into the area and do not know anyone. These sacrifices are what build a military community and the strong bonds that many in the military experience. This is the most important of what the Gold Star represents and what the military service embodies. The star and the Gold Star Hall represent those service members who sacrifice for their fellow soldiers, their country, for a foreign civilian population, and for their family back home. Their sacrifice and their family sacrifice is what I'm reminded of whenever I walk through the Gold Star Hall, on my way to class or to the Veterans Center. So thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit about myself and what the Gold Star means to me and to honor those who gave that ultimate sacrifice.
Today, we will share remembrances of 5 brave Iowa State students who gave their lives for this country. Retired Navy Commander Daniel A. Burr will speak about Howard Medine. Retired Navy Captain Paul Fellini will speak about brothers James R. Davis and Raymond Roderick Davis. Army Lieutenant Colonel Jeremy Paul will speak about Donald Scott Wilkins. And finally, Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Daniel P. Devine will speak about Ronald Edgar Reedy. Commander Burr, will you start us off, please?
Good afternoon. I just want to say, what an amazing rendition of our national anthem. So just kudos. It's incredible. Each year, as I've been privileged to do something like this, to talk about the families that have really paid the ultimate sacrifice, I really have enjoyed kind of digging into the history of these young men and women. And that's the same thing that happened this time as we looked at Howard Medine for myself and realized that we had just a ton in common between myself and his family and our lives. And so part of that I thought was very unique is that, when I went to Iowa State here, I joined Farmhouse Fraternity. And then as I dug into the boys' lives, there was 4 young men, and they also all joined Farmhouse Fraternity. And so I'd mentioned that to my fraternity, and we have a small delegation from Farmhouse that also came in to show their support, so I appreciate that, guys. Thank you for being here. And then there's multiple other similarities, and I won't go into all of it, but when I was asked to pick somebody I could speak about, Howard really stood out, that I also grew up near Algona, and also spent a lot of time at the creamery, and you'll find out that, this entire family was involved in the creamery business. And just, also being served in the military. And we also talked about personal loss with the family before we started. And, my family experienced that too in World War II as we lost some twins and just the hole that it left. And we were talking about how much, it meant to the family and how hard it was, to lose the youngest son to serve in World War II. So none of that is lost on me. So thank you so much to the Medine family for being here. And it's absolutely my honor and privilege to speak about him today. So Howard Medine was born on December 2nd, 1917 in Algona, Iowa, the youngest of Rose and Samuel Medine's 4 boys. Like his 3 brothers, Carl, Kenneth, and Russell, he loved sports, hunting, and fishing. He graduated from Algona High School in 1935. While at Algona High School, he participated in football, wrestling, and track, and was the captain of the basketball team, and was also the secretary of his class. While playing football in high school, Howard was given the nickname Fido. This stuck because others said he would rather run through someone on the field instead of around them. He was also chosen as the quarterback of the North Central Football Conference team. Howard's father worked for the Algona Cooperative Creamery, delivering milk. The manager of the creamery, Mads Christensen, made it possible for all the Medine brothers to go to college. Christensen would pay for their schooling so long as they all majored in dairy science, and then repaid him by working in the creamery during the summers. So Howard followed his 3 brothers to Ames to Iowa State College, keeping true to his word, he majored in dairy. While at Iowa State, he was very active in social organizations and activities, participating in football, wrestling, and the Dairy Club, and the Farmhouse Fraternity. As a senior, Howard served as secretary of the Farmhouse Fraternity, won a varsity letter I in football, and was a starter on the football team. His picture, name, and number were displayed on posters advertising the football games, a great honor for an athlete at this time. He graduated in June of 1940, receiving a BS in agriculture. After graduating Iowa State, Howard sent to work for the milk plant at the University of Iowa in Iowa City. Not sure why he'd want to go there, but that's where he ended up working. After about 2 years later, after the start of World War II, he enlisted in the Army Air Corps, January 28, 1942, at Fort Des Moines, Iowa. He was 24 years old. He trained at Rankin Aeronautical Academy in Tulare, California, Air Corps Basic Flying School in Lemoore, California, and Luke Field outside of Phoenix, Arizona. He graduated Tuesday, September 29, 1942, from the Air Force Advanced Flying School, Luke Field, Arizona. He obviously did very well during his training, as his plane of choice was the P-39 Airacobra. And if you know anything about that airplane, it was quite advanced for its time. He was a pilot in the 327th Fighter Squadron and was stationed in Hamilton Field in California to get ready for foreign service. While in the Army Air Corps, Howard was given his new call sign, Homer, by his fellow pilots, who must have loved having a Midwest guy in the squadron. On December 30th, 1942, Howard was flying in a 2-plane formation flight. While about to land at Hamilton Field, the other plane in his formation witnessed Howard's plane entering a steep dive and spiraled and crashed into the San Francisco Bay. It was either due to mechanical failure or possibly a loss of consciousness. Sea conditions were too dangerous that day, and a search and rescue operation could not be conducted. Howard was due to fly home the following day to see his family for New Year's. In the letter to his parents about his death, his commanding officer said that Howard displayed exceptional qualities of leadership and young American manhood. It is a little-known fact that 15,000 young men died in aircrew training in the U.S. during World War II. Aviation was barely out of its infancy during the 1940s. Civil aviation was far from safe, and military aviation even less so. As war loomed, the U.S. dramatically ramped up aircraft production and aircrew training. Many new aircraft designs were rushed into production. Companies such as GM and Packard that had never produced airplanes or aircraft engines before were given contracts because they had manufacturing capability. The resulting retooling and production achievements were impressive, but came at a cost. Many planes were put to use without proper testing, and in many cases, even design flaws were known. But there was no time to investigate and take corrective actions. Engine failures onboard fires were common, but sadly, the war took precedence over safety, and the U.S. rushed to mount its defense. The courage displayed by the aircrew in combat over Germany and Japan and the losses they sustained is one of the most memorable stories of World War II, but it should not be forgotten that nearly 15,000 young men died in training accidents without ever leaving the United States. Although they never faced flak or Messerschmitts, their sacrifice was real and memorable as those shot down over Germany. Thank you.
Lieutenant James Davis. The Davis family was devoted to both Iowa State and our nation's armed forces going back to Harry Davis Sr., who was a United States Army veteran as well as a 1909 graduate of Iowa State. Harry married a fellow Iowa State College graduate named Coral Roberts from the class of 1910. The couple stayed in Ames and settled down in a home at 413 10th Street. Harry and Coral had 5 sons: Robert, James, Harry Jr., Raymond, and Paul, as well as 2 daughters, Catherine and Coral. 3 of the sons went to Iowa State: James, Harry Jr., and Raymond, and eventually joined the Army during World War II. Paul also joined the Army Air Forces Reserve in 1943. James Davis was born in Ames in 1916 and graduated from Ames High School in 1936. After his time at Iowa State, James joined the Army Air Forces in 1941. James became a 2nd lieutenant as a reconnaissance pilot of the 91st Bomb Squadron and was stationed in the Philippines at the start of World War II. One of his brothers, Harry, was also stationed in the Philippines, assigned to an artillery regiment. In 1942, James was taken prisoner during the capture of the Philippines by Japanese forces. It is possible that Lieutenant Davis was forced to walk in the Bataan Death March, a grueling journey of prisoners of war to Japanese prison camps. Davis was kept in the Cabanatuan prison camp for 2 years until he was transferred to a labor camp. In late 1944, when the United States began to retake the Philippines, Japan hastily withdrew as many resources and prisoners of war as they could. The merchant ships used by the Japanese were known as hell ships by the prisoners due to the inhumane conditions. These ships were not only POW transports, but also carried military supplies and sometimes Japanese soldiers. The ships were painted warship gray and carried no markings to indicate POWs were aboard. Carrying both military supplies and prisoners, these ships blurred the distinction between military targets and non-combatants. Allied aircraft and submarines often attacked the ships because of the Japanese soldiers and weapons on board, not knowing that POWs were below deck. James was forced onto the ship Orinoco Maru on December 13th of 1944. The ship was built as a luxury liner before the war, but used by the Japanese to carry 1,600 prisoners of war in the holds below deck. Men were packed in until there was no room to move, very little air to breathe, and the temperatures rose to over 100 degrees. Men began passing out from suffocation and dehydration. On December 14th, aircraft from the USS Hornet and the USS Cabot began attacking the Orinoco Maru and escort ships. Taking advantage of the chaos of the attacks, some POWs tried charging up the single hatch out of the hold. Japanese soldiers indiscriminately shot into the prisoners to quell the riot. The bomb and bullet holes did allow more ventilation and light into the hold, which helped the POWs breathe a little easier. The Orinoco Maru was not only transporting POWs, but also Japanese civilians back to Japan. During the attacks, the POWs heard the cries of people dying and could feel blood dripping on them from the decks above. When the American forces stopped their attack for the evening, the Japanese began evacuating the civilians from the ship in lifeboats. At about the same time, the prisoners began going mad from the heat and the dehydration, with deadly fights erupting between them. On the morning of the 15th, the American planes resumed their attack, crippling the ship and causing it to sink. As the water began to rise, POWs desperately tried to escape. The Japanese once again began shooting at the prisoners from the lifeboats. It was at this moment the POWs realized the Japanese intended for them to go down with the ship. More than 1,200 POWs dove into the water and swam the less than half mile to shore. The Japanese shot some in the water before rounding up the other survivors on land. Somewhere in this chaos, Lieutenant Davis was killed. James was not the only Iowa State Service member killed on the ship. Captain Tomas Delamore was also from Ames and did not survive the sinking of the Orinoco Maru. Those who survived did not fare much better. They were put on another hell ship and were sent to Japan to do hard labor. By the time the war ended, fewer than 200 of the original 1,600 POWs on board the Orinoco Maru survived to come home. For the atrocities against the prisoners of war on their torturous journey to Japan, the leading guard commandant was found guilty of war crimes by the Allied forces and executed. All of the guards on board the Orinoco Maru were given long prison sentences for their roles in abusing and killing the prisoners of war. Please take a moment to recall the sacrifice of Lieutenant James Davis in service of our country. Captain Ramon Davis. Captain Davis was a veteran of 2 wars, serving in both World War II and the Korean War as a fighter pilot. Captain Davis was born in Ames on October 12, 1924, and was the younger brother of James Davis. Raymond graduated from Ames High School in 1942 and moved on to attend what was then Iowa State College, but only for 2.5 months. His time at Iowa State was cut short by his enlistment in the United States Army on November 14th, 1942 in Des Moines. After initial training, Raymond was assigned to the 63rd Fighter Squadron of the 56th Fighter Group at a Royal Air Force base in Great Britain on January 9, 1943. The 56th Fighter Group was an elite fighting force. The group was the second most successful in air-to-air combat in the entire Army Air Forces, participating in the invasion of Normandy of June 1944, as well as the Battle of the Bulge at the end of 1944. Because of actions attacking German anti-aircraft sites in the Netherlands, the group earned a Distinguished Unit Citation. At the time, the 56th Fighter Group destroyed 550 Nazi-occupied France. Davis and 7 other pilots destroyed 20 locomotives, 25 rail cars, 17 trucks, and 6 barges. While on a combat mission with 2 other fighters to attack an airfield in Hanau, Germany on November 18, 1944, Lieutenant Davis and his wingmen engaged enemy aircraft. Lieutenant Davis reported downing his first airplane, a Focke-Wulf 190, with the pilot bailing out. He reported his second kill in February of 1945 when he downed a German Messerschmitt 109. Lieutenant Davis reported, "It was the hottest fight I've ever been in." Lieutenant Davis left Europe for the United States in April of 1945. What was supposed to be only a few months of leave turned out to be permanent when Victory in Europe Day came only a month later. After arriving home, he spoke with a journalism class on his experiences of the war. He believed that the United States' advantage in the air lay in the fast thinking and good training of its pilots. Even though Davis was home in the United States, that was not the end of his military career. Lieutenant Davis entered the Korean War with the 12th Fighter Squadron of the 18th Fighter Bomber Group at the onset of the war. He was stationed at the Busan Air Base in South Korea, flying F-51 Mustangs. Just a few months into the war, on October 5th, 1950, Lieutenant Davis departed Busan Air Base as the flight leader in a two-plane armed reconnaissance mission over North Korea. Over Sucheon, North Korea, Lieutenant Davis's plane was hit by enemy anti-aircraft fire. Davis tried to turn back and reach the safety of South Korea, but he was not able to fly that far. He was forced to land his aircraft on a sandbar in the Taedong River. He was seen getting out of his plane and waving to the pilot of the other plane before walking into the hills east of the river. That was the last time that Lieutenant Davis was seen. Because of heavy enemy presence in the area, search and rescue operations were not possible. While designated as missing in action, Lieutenant Davis was promoted to the rank of captain. After the war, no American prisoners reported seeing or hearing about Captain Davis, and no remains matching his description were returned to the United States. Captain Davis remains one of over 7,600 Americans who are still unaccounted for from the Korean War. While we will probably never know what happened to Captain Davis, we do know about the life of this Iowa State veteran who served his country with distinction in 2 wars and on 2 continents. No one from the Davis family was able to attend our ceremony. So I would ask everyone present here today who can to please stand now to honor Captain and Lieutenant Davis as members of the extended Iowa State Cyclone family. Thank you. Please be seated.
Good afternoon. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Jeremy Paul. I'm the professor of military science here at Iowa State University. And it's an honor for me today to get to share the story of one of our former cadets in the Cyclone Battalion, Don Wilkins. Donald Scott Wilkins was born in Ames on May 20th, 1922, to Eleanor and Franklin Scott Wilkins. Growing up, he was an older brother to his only sibling, his sister Joanne. Don's grandfather helped build St. John's Episcopal Church just across the street from the Memorial Union. Don was a faithful person, serving as an acolyte at St. John's right up to the point in which he was deployed to Korea in 1950. Don's father was on the faculty at Iowa State College and was an expert on soybean production and a research professor in forage crops. Don was a careful and precise person. He won a prize for being the safest driver in his driver's ed class, for being the only person to drive the course with a glass milk jug standing up in the back seat. He was always known as the brainy kid. When he was younger, Don won an intelligence contest that won him an engraved watch and a trip for 2 to attend the 1939 New York's World's Fair with his mother. He was thought as a super smart and hard worker by others. Don aspired to be a medical doctor, and all those traits would eventually make Don a terrific practitioner. Don's father, Franklin, died in 1936 when Don was 14, and his mother worked to support herself and her 2 children. She was a college-educated with a degree in home economics education and was recruited by the WOI radio in 1939 to host a show called The Homemaker's Half Hour. It was said to have been the earliest women's radio program in the Midwest. Eleanor became a famous local radio and TV personality on WOI, known by her on-air name, Martha Duncan. Don graduated from Ames High School in 1940 and attended Iowa State College, where he earned his pre-med degree in 1946. While at Iowa State, he was a member of the Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC. It's possible that since his mother was the sole support of the family, that Don was in ROTC to get the financial help he needed to go to college and then medical school. Due to his strong academics, Don was the first person in the U.S. to receive a military scholarship to go to medical school. He attended the University of Iowa, where he received his degree in anesthesiology in 1947. While stationed at an Army base near Boston on reserves duty, Don met the woman who would become his wife, Shirley Needham. They met at a USO dance when he was working at a club in Boston, living with an aunt after her parents died. Interestingly, she was the granddaughter of Lewis Pamel, Iowa State's noted botanist. Shirley was a bright girl, having been valedictorian of her high school class, possibly one of the reasons she and Don connected. While Don was a bright guy, he was an awful dancer, allegedly. At the dance where Don and Shirley met, he stepped on Shirley's feet many times, when he made up for it by being very kind, smart, and sweet. Shirley and Don were married on June 29, 1946 in Boston, Massachusetts. While he earned his degree at the University of Iowa, Don authored several articles on his anesthesiology findings, cooperating with the statistical department of Iowa State College. The University of Iowa's Department of Anesthesiology named their library in his honor. Don was the first person in the U.S. to receive a military scholarship to go to medical school. He completed his residency in 1947 and 48 at Pennsylvania Hospital in Philadelphia. After finishing his residency, Don moved to Battle Creek, Michigan, where he worked at the Percy Jones Army Hospital before the onset of the Korean War. Don left his then pregnant wife, Shirley, for Korea in early autumn of 1950. He was obligated to go under the terms of his medical scholarship. Don served as a captain in a MASH unit as an anesthesiologist. His first job responsibility was being responsible for putting polio patients in iron lungs on the hospital ship. Don quickly contracted polio and became a patient on the very ship that he was working. Don died of polio on 6 October 1950. On the day that his wife and mother were notified of his death, in the mail, they received a letter from Don explaining his illness and trying to reassure them by saying he was receiving the finest treatment available. He was in Korea for only 2 months and died a year before the polio vaccine was even introduced. Don is buried here at the Iowa State University Cemetery in a plot with his parents and his sister. The baby that Shirley was carrying when Don had died, and who he was never to meet, was a son, Scott. Wilkins' son, Scott Wilkins Beckett, donated several of his father's items to the University of Iowa Anesthesiology Department Library, which is named for Wilkins, the Wilkins Memorial Library. Each year around Memorial Day, staff at the Memorial Union has witnessed a wreath placed in front of Donald's name in the Gold Star Hall. Don's sister Joanne started doing the wreath along with the graveside flowers long ago. Don's niece, Kim Borman, continued after her mother's passing in 1977 and has faithfully remembered Don year after year. And the wreath is what prompted us to honor Donald Wilkins this year. Don's wife, Shirley Beckett, died just 3 days ago at the age of 98. We express our sympathies to the family members that are here today. Would all those that are here today for Donald Scott Wilkins please rise and be recognized?
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Dan Devine. I graduated from Iowa State University in 1987. Well, it doesn't seem very long ago when I was one of these young midshipmen back here. I didn't do this ceremony back then, but I was on color guard. And there's actually a picture of me across from the CO's office at nighttime with the color guard at the 50-yard line, Iowa State. I retired in 2007, and as my fellow officers and retirees, it is a pleasure to be here today to honor fellow Iowa State students. Ronald Edgar Reedy was born on January 5th, 1944 in St. Louis, Missouri. Simply known as Ron, he was always interested in airplanes and engineering. Even as a young kid, Ron could name every kind of plane that flew over his house. In school, he was head of his classmates to such a degree that he skipped 5th grade and went straight into 6th. As a child, Ron played baseball on a Little League team and also played the trumpet. After graduating high school, Ron enrolled at Iowa State in aerospace engineering. He chose Iowa State for its aerospace engineering program instead of the Missouri University of Science and Technology, even though he had a full scholarship at Missouri. At Iowa State, Ron roomed in Helzer Hall and was a member of the Stalker House. Those who knew him remembered Ron as a hardworking student who was always willing to help the underclassmen study. While Ron did not participate in intramurals along with his housemates, he always supported them on the sidelines. And unlike most of his other classmates, Ron was not from Iowa. On the weekends, when others went back home helping on the farm or visiting their families, Ron was stuck at school studying. Toward the end of his time at Iowa State, Ron confided in others that he was not sure he wanted to be chained to a desk his entire life. He was not even sure he wanted to be an engineer. Ron graduated from Iowa State in the spring of 1966. Wanting some excitement in his life, before he began his career as an engineer, he decided to join the Marine Corps Reserve. In the Marines, Ron attended flight school, hoping to become a jet pilot. In every flight school class, both then and now, the top members of the class were able to choose whether they flew jets or helicopters. Ron thought about this ability to choose and studied as hard as he could. He became top of his class. But when it came time to choose what he wanted to fly, Ron learned that there were no fighter jet spots available. So he became a helicopter pilot flying Huey gunships. I understand from talking to the family, the class before him had 10 jet spots available, and in his, none. Ron was deployed to Quang Tri Province, Vietnam, with the 1st Marine Aircraft Wing. Being a helicopter pilot in Vietnam was one of the most dangerous jobs in the military at the time. The military used 12,000 helicopters during the Vietnam War. Over 5,000 of them, nearly half of them, were destroyed. The average lifespan of a pilot in Ron's position was 30 days. Ron earned the highest possible medal after the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Flying Cross, for flying in a sortie where enemy fire brought down several of his wingmen. Disregarding his own personal safety, Ron landed his helicopter and instructed his machine gunners to provide covering fire as he dragged his comrades out of the wreckage. While he did more than was asked for, none of the fellow Marines survived. On April 13th, 1968, as a co-pilot of a Huey gunship, Ron was tasked with escorting 2 medical helicopters that were evacuating injured Marines back to base. The actual pickup of the wounded went smoothly. However, as they were flying back down the valley, the gunships and the medical helicopters became separated in clouds. When a break in the clouds occurred, the lead medical helicopter suddenly came down on top of Ron's, and both crashed to the ground. 12 men, including Ron, died in this collision. In his commanding officer's letter to Ron's family, he stated, "Ron was one of the finest Marine officers I'd ever known. His exemplary conduct, leadership, and singular determination to do every job well were qualities that all of us respected." Ron's eligibility to be named in the Gold Star Hall went unrecognized for years, until a former Helzer Hall housemate of his and fellow Vietnam Marine veteran, Bill Evans, spoke up. Because of Bill, Ron's name was added to the Gold Star Hall this past summer. Now a whole new generation of Iowa State students can remember the life and sacrifices of Ronald Edgar Reedy. Would all those who are here today for Ronald Edgar Reedy please rise and be recognized?
Thank you to all of our readers who have shared these stories. Let's remember our honorees now with a moment of silence. Thank you. We'd also like to extend a special thanks to all of the family members who were able to make it here today. I understand that there were quite a few from way outside of our state of Iowa, including Kansas, Florida, Illinois, Texas, Arkansas, Maine, Missouri, and even New Mexico. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. We will now like to close our ceremony with the final reading of names. Howard Medine. James R. Davis. Raymond Roderick David. Donald Scott Wilkins. Ronald Edgar Reedy. Please rise now for the playing of taps and the retiring of our colors. Thank you. Please be seated. Since the inception of the Memorial Union and the Gold Star Hall ceremony, the role of the Memorial Union Director in partnership with the Military Affiliated Student Center has been to ensure the legacy of the Memorial Union's purpose and to ensure our veterans and their families know that we will always remember them for their service and sacrifice. A secondary role for the director is to serve as MC for this ceremony. And within this capacity, over the last 6 years, has allowed me to pause and reflect more deeply. From this reflection, I wish to express my heartfelt thanks to all the members of our military family for everything they contend with on a daily basis, including being away from their families at times, being far away from their homelands on deployments, the mental health issues that they often face, and for their bravery in fighting for their country. The ceremony is for you and the freedom you provide for all of us. I would also like to thank the Gold Star Hall Committee for their work to help plan this ceremony. All of the committee members are listed within your program. A special thank you to Ethan Reid, our Gold Star Hall research assistant, for his many hours of hard work and writing which brought our honorees' stories to life. Yes. Guests are invited to view the names of our honorees in the Gold Star Hall and displays about the honorees in the Oak Room right behind you, and join us for a small reception back here in the Great Hall. Following our ceremony today, the Military Affiliated Student Center and the ISU Lectures Program are sponsoring a Veterans Day lecture featuring Dr. Timothy Walters discussing the repercussions of the USS Maine's explosion 125 years ago and its role in the Spanish-American War. This event will be at 6 p.m. in the Sunroom. Free Veterans Day 2022 stickers will be given to the first 50 attendees. I'd like to thank you all again for coming to Iowa State University's Gold Star Hall ceremony, and especially to our families and our honorees. Thank you very much for coming.